The galaxy had seen wars, it had seen empires rise and fall, but nothing ever felt as heavy, as dark, as silent as the day the Galaxy Empire placed 3 human women in chains and dragged them into the center of a colossal arena built not for celebration, but for fear, and the crowds gathered from dozens of species, filling every tier, every balcony, every screen across the star systems, watching with wide eyes and trembling hearts as Arya, Lena, and Selene, 3 human generals known not for cruelty but for courage, stood tall despite the bruises on their faces, despite the blood on their uniforms, despite the weight of the moment pressing on their shoulders. The Empire's soldiers surrounded them with guns raised, armor shining, banners snapping through the cold wind, trying to show power, trying to show control. But somehow these 3 women, even in chains, looked stronger than the army around them, and the silence in the arena wasn't victory, it was fear. Arya, the eldest, lifted her chin, her dark hair tangled but her eyes sharp like fire, refusing to bow, refusing to plead, and Lena, fierce and steady, stared straight into the cameras broadcasting to millions, her jaw clenched, her breath calm, like a lion trapped but unbroken, while Selene, youngest but brightest, closed her eyes just for a moment as if whispering to someone far away, someone she knew would hear her even across death. The Empire's High Marshal stepped forward, his voice amplified, cold as metal, declaring that these women were traitors, rebels, enemies of order, and he said they had refused to kneel, refused to obey, refused to surrender, and so their punishment would be final execution. The crowd gasped, some in shock, some in horror, and some in dark satisfaction, because the Empire had spent years telling the galaxy that humans were dangerous, wild, unpredictable, and now, with this public display, they wanted everyone to believe humanity was finally defeated. But the strange truth was that the fear in the air wasn't coming from the humans. It was coming from everyone else. Because even chained, even beaten, Arya's voice rose, steady and fearless, echoing through the arena as she said, "We do not kneel." Lena added, "We do not break." And Selene opened her eyes and whispered, barely audible, "We are never alone." Those words shook something deep in every watching soul, something ancient, something forgotten, and for a split second the Empire soldiers hesitated, as if their hands suddenly weighed too much to lift, too heavy to kill legends. But orders were orders, and the Marshal raised his hand, signaling the firing squad, and a wave of trembling ran through the arena as rifles clicked into position. The galaxy went silent, not just the arena, but entire planets, stations, ships. Everyone watching the broadcast felt their breath freeze in their chest. 3 humans, standing shoulder to shoulder, eyes forward, hearts unshaken, faced death without flinching. And then the command came. A flash of light. 3 shots. 3 bodies falling to the cold metal floor. The scream that rose from the crowd wasn't triumph. It was shock, terror, disbelief. Because something about their deaths felt wrong, too final, too loud, too heavy, as if the universe itself recoiled. The broadcasting screens went black for a moment, glitching, flickering, and then returned to normal, showing the Empire's flag waving triumphantly as the Marshal announced that humanity's defiance was over, that their will was broken forever, and laughter rippled through the Empire ranks as they celebrated their victory. But far away, in the shadowed corners of space, in abandoned stations and sealed databanks, something stirred. A forgotten file unlocked. A sensor registered motion deep in restricted sectors. A name, long erased from history, flashed across encrypted screens. Project Alibaba Yaga, do not activate. Alarms went off in secret Empire bunkers, red lights spinning like frantic eyes. But before anyone could shut the system down, hidden messages shot across deep space channels, awakening codes buried for decades, triggering signals humanity had left behind like sleeping wolves. The name spread in whispers, Baba Yaga, the ghost of a man the galaxy had sworn never to mention. A human legend said to be unstoppable, untraceable, unkillable. A shadow used in bedtime stories to scare children and in war rooms to silence generals. Some believed he was a myth. Others believed he died long ago. But the truth was something far more terrifying. He had been waiting. Across distant star stations, old commanders pale with age felt their blood run cold as they heard the news of the executions, and they whispered to their officers, "They killed his daughters." Across the galaxy, Enemy admirals who had once survived battles with him felt their hands shake so violently they dropped their weapons. Entire species that knew the legend retreated into their cities, locking their doors, praying to silent gods, because Baba Yaga was not just a name, it was a warning. And when the Empire's leaders heard the whispers, they laughed loudly, arrogantly, calling it superstition, calling it fear, calling it nonsense. There is no Baba Yaga, they said. Humans are nothing. But far beneath a forgotten moon, deep inside a warship buried under stone and silence, a single light flicked on. A pod hissed open. A pair of human eyes opened, cold, sharp, ancient with pain. And a voice, hoarse, steady, terrifyingly calm, said one word that rippled through space like a storm, Arya. Another breath. Lena. A tremor in the air. Selene. His hands clenched, veins burning with fury and grief, and the ship around him began to wake, engines growling like a beast freed from chains. The galaxy shivered. Something had been unleashed. The Baba Yaga was real. And he had just learned the one truth the Empire should never have let reach him. They killed the only people he ever loved. In that moment, the galaxy did not cheer. It did not celebrate. It did not rejoice in the Empire's victory. It trembled. Because everyone, even those who hated humans, knew the ancient rule whispered through generations. If you take a human's family, you take your own fate. And for the first time since the execution, the universe felt something colder than death, heavier than war, sharper than fear. It felt the quiet promise of a storm. Humanity was not broken. Humanity was waking. And somewhere in the silence between stars, a legend exhaled and began to rise. The Empire thought it had ended a rebellion. Instead, it had lit the fuse to the most dangerous force in human history. Baba Yaga was coming, and nothing in the galaxy was ready. The moon where the Empire had buried its darkest secret was silent, a dead world covered in dust and forgotten metal, a place no one visited, no one studied, no one even named anymore, because the Empire believed that what slept beneath it would never wake again. But as the echo of the 3 executions rippled through hidden networks and ancient command codes, the ground began to tremble. Gently at first, then stronger, as if the planet itself felt grief. Rising from its core, and deep under layers of rock and steel, in a chamber sealed for decades, cold machines flickered to life, screens lighting up with faces long erased from history. Arya, Lena, Selene. The last known human generals of their era, and a silent alarm pulsed in red, repeating one message again and again. Loss confirmed. Inside a glass pod at the center of the chamber, a man lay still, pale, motionless, breath frozen in suspended time, his body scarred, his hands curled slightly as if holding onto a dream or a memory, and as the lights intensified, the seals around the pod cracked, steam hissed outward, and the man's chest rose in a slow, shuddering breath, the first breath he had taken in 30 years. His eyelids fluttered, heavy and reluctant, as if waking was not a choice but a wound being forced open, and when his eyes finally opened, they were not warm, not confused, not frightened. They were cold, sharp, and filled with a pain so deep it felt older than the metal around him. His name was Kale, but the galaxy once called him something else, Baba Yaga, the human nightmare, the ghost of war, the man who ended empires and walked out of burning battlefields without leaving a trace, the weapon humanity used only when all hope was gone. For a long moment he said nothing, sitting in the half-open pod, his breath shallow, his fingers gripping the edge as memories flickered like broken lightning across his mind. Laughing voices, training fields, 3 young girls running beside him, their faces full of fire and promise, his promise to protect them, raise them, teach them, call them daughters even though blood did not bind them. Arya telling him she would lead armies someday. Lena vowing she would never lose a battle. Selene whispering she wanted to make him proud. Those memories warmed him for half a heartbeat, and then the broadcast appeared on the screen in front of him. 3 women kneeling. Chains. Guns raised. Arya's final stare. Lena's clenched jaw. Selene's whisper, "We are never alone." And then the shots. The fall. The silence. The world inside him shattered. His hand reached out, trembling, fingertips brushing the screen as if trying to hold their faces. Stop time, change fate, but the footage ended. Replaced by the Empire's flag, the Marshal's cold voice announcing their deaths like a victory. Kale lowered his head, and for a terrifying moment it seemed like he couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't exist, like grief itself was crushing him from the inside. And then a single sound escaped him. A breath, soft and broken, but filled with something darker than rage, something deeper than sorrow. He whispered their names, one by one, not as a soldier calling his commanders, but as a father mourning his children, Arya. Lena. Selene. His voice cracked on the last name, and his body shook, not with weakness but with the unbearable weight of loss, because he had sworn to protect them, sworn to keep them safe, sworn that no one in the galaxy would ever touch them, and now they were gone. Killed by cowardice, killed for power, killed to send a message. His fists clenched until his knuckles bled, nails digging into skin, and tears slid down his face. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent rivers of rage and love mixed together. And when he finally lifted his head, the softness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a stillness so cold it felt like death itself was learning a new shape. He rose from the pod, every movement slow and deliberate, like a storm forming inch by inch, and the entire chamber responded to him. Lights brightening, engines humming beneath the floor, walls shifting to reveal a massive black corridor leading deeper into the structure. The warship Nightfall waited at the end, dormant but alive, as if sensing its master's awakening, and Kale walked toward it without hesitation, barefoot on cold steel, his grief becoming purpose with every step. Screens along the corridor lit up, showing old headlines, old warnings, old commands. Do not release Alibaba Yaga, Worldender Protocol, extinction level risk, and each message only made his step steadier, his resolve harder. He reached the entrance of the ship, placed his hand on the dark metal, and the hull glowed beneath his touch, lighting up with ancient Terran runes, responding not to code, not to clearance, but to him alone. The doors opened, welcoming the one man the galaxy feared more than war itself, and Kale stepped inside, surrounded by shadows, engines awakening like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. He sat in the command chair, exhaled slowly, and whispered the only command the ship needed, wake. Nightfall roared to life, lights flooding the chamber, engines screaming like something alive and furious, and screens across the galaxy flickered with the impossible news. An old human warship had just left a dead moon, heading toward Empire space. Empire officers laughed at first, calling it a relic, calling it a joke, calling Baba Yaga a myth. But for some reason their hands shook, their voices cracked, and their hearts pounded like prey sensing a predator. Because somewhere deep in every species' history, there was a warning passed down like a curse. If the Baba Yaga rises, run. But it was already too late to run. Kale's eyes stared into the void ahead. No hesitation, no mercy, only a single truth burning brighter than stars. They took his family. Now he would take their empire. And the galaxy, watching in terrified silence, finally understood. The executions hadn't ended the war. They had started the most terrifying one in history. The Baba Yaga was unleashed. And nothing would stop him now. Nightfall sliced through the dark of space like a silent blade, its black hull absorbing starlight until it looked less like a ship and more like a moving shadow, something alive, something angry, something born from grief, and inside its command chamber Kale sat perfectly still, hands resting on the armrests, eyes fixed forward, his face carved in a calm so cold it felt inhuman. But beneath that stillness was a storm powerful enough to tear worlds apart. The ship's systems scanned the galaxy, pulling up maps, routes, enemy bases, and Kale's gaze flicked to one glowing point. The outpost where Arya, Lena, and Selene had been held before their execution. His jaw tightened, a faint tremor passing through his fingers, because he could almost hear Arya's voice laughing in training halls, Lena arguing fiercely about tactics, Selene humming softly before missions, and each memory struck him like a knife, not weakening him, but sharpening him, shaping him into something the Empire would never be ready for. Nightfall spoke in a soft artificial voice, emotionless, loyal, destination, Empire forward command. Confirmation required. Kale didn't blink, didn't breathe for a moment, then whispered, confirmed. The ship accelerated, engines roaring silently, bending space around it, faster than any Empire scanner could track, and in that moment the hunt began, not a battle, not a war, but a hunt driven not by duty or glory, but by love twisted into vengeance. Far ahead, the Empire's forward command station floated above a dead planet, confident, guarded by dozens of cruisers, patrol ships, drones, its captains relaxed, laughing in their control rooms, convinced humanity was finished, convinced they had won. One officer joked loudly, showing off a replay of the execution, mocking the general's last words, and the room erupted in cruel, careless laughter. Laughter that died instantly when every monitor flickered and went black. The lights dimmed. The alarms stuttered. The power grid shivered, not from overload, but from fear built into the circuits themselves, as if the machines remembered something their operators did not. A single message appeared across every screen in blood-red letters. I am coming. The station commander froze, hands trembling, breath catching like something heavy had wrapped around his lungs, and he whispered to no one. That can't be real. But already, outside the viewport, the darkness deepened, stars disappearing behind an approaching shape, nightfall emerging from warp in total silence, no engines flaring, no signals transmitting, no warning, only presence, a vast shadow that dwarfed every Empire ship around it. Panic erupted across the station, soldiers scrambling, sirens wailing, officers shouting orders that sounded hollow and desperate. Prepare cannons. Deploy fighters. Lock fire on target. But before they could fire, before they could even see the full outline of the ship, an entire cruiser beside them split in half, clean and soundless, as if carved by an invisible blade. No explosion. No debris. Just silence, and then two drifting halves. The soldiers stared, speechless, horrified, because nothing, absolutely nothing in the Empire arsenal could do that. The station commander whispered, voice shaking uncontrollably, How is it attacking? We didn't detect any weapon. Another cruiser imploded, collapsing inward like crushed paper. A third vanished completely, erased from space, leaving only sparks drifting where metal once existed. And then, for the first time, Nightfall spoke, not with words but with a low, rising hum, a heartbeat of vengeance, a pulse that rattled every bone on the station, and the commander understood, this wasn't war. This was execution. Kale didn't blink as he watched the ships fall, his breathing steady, his expression unmoving, and yet inside him something was breaking open. Not rage, not hatred, but pain so deep it had turned into purpose. He wasn't hunting ships. He was hunting everyone who let his daughters die. Nightfall breached the station's defenses as if they weren't there, sliding into docking range without a scratch, and Kale rose from his chair, his steps slow but heavy with destiny, his eyes colder than space itself. The airlock opened. Steam hissed. Empire soldiers stood waiting, shaking, weapons raised but hands unsteady, and even though they outnumbered Kale 50-1, they couldn't make themselves fire, because something about the way he walked toward them, calm, silent, unarmored, felt more terrifying than any weapon. One soldier begged, voice cracking, stop. Don't come closer. Kale didn't even look at him. He kept walking. They fired. Bullets streaked through the air, bright flashes tearing toward him, and vanished. Disintegrated mid-flight, dissolving into dust inches away from his body. The soldiers gasped, stumbling backward, breathless, terrified, because Kale didn't raise a shield, didn't activate armor, didn't even flinch. He simply stepped through death like it was air. His voice, when it finally came, was soft enough to be mistaken for a whisper in a dream, but sharp enough to pierce every heart in the room. Where were you when they begged for mercy? No one answered. They couldn't, because they all knew they had watched. They all knew they had done nothing. Kale moved past them, not killing them, not touching them, because their punishment was already alive inside them, fear. In the command room, the station's officers huddled together, trembling, trying to override systems, trying to call reinforcements, but every screen displayed only one image now, a still shot of Arya, Lena, and Selene before execution, standing proud in chains. Kale entered the room. The officers froze. The commander fell to his knees, tears filling his eyes, choking on his own fear as he whispered. We were following orders. Kale stared at him. Silent, expression unreadable, and for a moment the commander thought he might be spared. Then Kale stepped forward, slow, deliberate, and leaned close enough for his breath to graze the man's ear. So was I. The lights went out. When they returned, the station was empty. No bodies. No screams. Nothing but silence. From that day forward, the Empire learned a truth too late. Baba Yaga didn't kill armies. He erased them. And as nightfall slipped back into the void, leaving the ruined station behind, Kale whispered into the darkness, voice trembling with grief that burned hotter than war. This is only the beginning. The galaxy, listening in terrified silence, finally understood. He wasn't chasing victory. He was hunting justice. And justice, in human hands, was unstoppable. The destruction of the forward command spread through the Empire like a silent scream, racing across encrypted channels, crashing into war rooms, rattling every admiral, every captain, every soldier who had once laughed at humanity's weakness, and suddenly the name they mocked became a curse they dared not speak aloud, Baba Yaga. Entire fleets were ordered to regroup, orders barked through trembling voices as the Empire scrambled to understand what had just happened, how an ancient human ship had erased their strongest outpost without warning, without losses, without mercy. In the royal citadel at the heart of the Empire's capital world, the Emperor himself stood frozen before a massive holographic map, watching as the forward command's signal blinked out, replaced by a single line of text that pulsed like a heartbeat. He is here. For the first time in decades, the Emperor's confidence cracked, his hand gripping the edge of the console to steady himself, because he remembered the old files, the old battles, the old warnings spoken in dark hallways by generals who never returned. Kale didn't fight like an ordinary human. He fought like fate. And fate could not be outrun. Panic seeped into the Empire like ink into water, staining every rank, every council, every breath, and high-ranking officers gathered in a desperate emergency meeting, voices sharp, frantic, overlapping as they argued about how to stop a man they once believed didn't exist. His only one human, someone shouted, voice too loud, too shaky. One human destroyed 37 ships. Another whispered, eyes wide with horror. We need more fleets. More weapons. More soldiers. More everything. But beneath all the noise, beneath all the fear, one truth echoed through every mind like a silent verdict. They had started this. Outside the citadel, in streets filled with towering alien buildings and neon skies, civilians huddled around public screens, watching the news unfold in trembling silence, and the broadcast looped the same image. The forward command shattered, fleets gone, no survivors, and for the first time, the fear wasn't about the Empire losing. It was about the Empire being wrong. Deep in underground bunkers, Empire scientists pulled up ancient Terran records, forbidden files sealed by past regimes, and their faces paled as they read the truth. Kale wasn't a myth. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a rumor. He was the most dangerous soldier humanity ever created, trained not to conquer planets but to break empires from the inside out. The women generals, Arya, Lena, Selene, hadn't just been commanders. They had been his family, his world, the only anchor that kept him human. And when they died, whatever humanity he had left died with them. The Empire had not killed 3 soldiers. They had killed the only light in a monster's heart. And now the monster was coming. Far across space, aboard Nightfall, Kale stood in the dim glow of the command bridge, staring at a small metal pendant resting in his palm. A pendant shaped like a star, worn and scratched, belonging once to Selene. His thumb brushed the surface as if trying to feel her pulse through the cold metal, and his voice, low and almost broken, whispered, "I should have been there." The guilt inside him was not loud or wild. It was silent and suffocating, a weight that pressed against his ribs until he could barely breathe, because he didn't just lose them. He failed them. A memory flickered, Selene gripping his hand when she was little, her voice bright, "Promise you'll always come back." And his own voice, deep and steady, "I promise." Now that promise lay shattered like glass, and the shards cut deeper with every breath. Mara, one of his oldest lieutenants, appeared on the bridge, her steps hesitant, her face filled with a grief she didn't know how to offer or share, and for a long moment she simply stood beside him, watching the pendant in his hand. Finally, her voice trembled out, "Kale, what do you want?" He did not look up. His jaw tightened, eyes dark and distant, as he answered with a calm so chilling it felt like the end of the world. I want them to feel it. Mara's breath caught. Feel what? Kale closed his hand around the pendant, holding it like the last heartbeat he had left. Loss. Nightfall sensors beeped softly, marking a new target, an Empire manufacturing moon, the heart of their weapons program, a world crawling with soldiers and machinery, a place believed to be untouchable. Kale didn't hesitate. Set a course. The ship descended through the shadows of space like a falling star, silent, relentless, unstoppable, and when it reached the moon's defense perimeter, thousands of turrets locked onto it, alarms flaring, fleet after fleet deployed to intercept. The Empire believed they were ready. They believed numbers meant victory. They believed size meant strength. They believed everything except the truth. Kale didn't attack the strong. He attacked the guilty. In the control tower, officers stared at Nightfall approaching on the radar, their hands shaking as they shouted commands, air thick with panic. Fire all cannons. Deploy drones. Jam its systems. Everything launched at once. Missiles, beams, drones, torpedoes, filling the void with fire and thunder. And Nightfall vanished. 1 second it was there. The next, it wasn't. The radar blinked. The screens glitched. Officers froze. And then Nightfall appeared behind them, inside their perimeter, engines glowing like the eyes of death itself. Before they could react, every weapon on the moon shut down, one by one, flickering out like dying stars. Kale activated Nightfall's external broadcast, and his voice echoed across every speaker, every helmet, every screen, soft, cold, steady. This is not war. Soldiers froze. Engineers dropped their tools. Officers held their breath. This is balance. The moon went dark. In the capital, the Emperor watched in disbelief as the entire weapons hub of his empire fell silent. Grids collapsing, reactors disengaging, fleets turning to dead metal. No explosions. No fire. No battle. Just nothing. Kale hadn't come to destroy. He'd come to erase. And in that suffocating silence, the Empire finally understood the truth too late. Kale wasn't hunting victory. He was hunting justice. And justice in human hands was terrifying. As Nightfall lifted away, leaving a dead world behind, Kale whispered into the quiet, voice shaking with grief that bled into rage. For every life you took from us, I will take a future from you. The galaxy felt it, like a storm rolling across stars. This wasn't a man. This wasn't a myth. This was Baba Yaga unleashed, and every Empire breath in the universe turned to ice. The hunt had only begun. The fall of the weapons moon shattered whatever confidence the Empire still clung to, and across every sector commanders who once barked orders now whispered in shaking voices, terrified to even speak his name, because the pattern was clear now. Kale wasn't striking randomly, he wasn't lashing out blindly, he was dismantling the Empire piece by piece, killing what they relied on, destroying what they believed made them powerful. And worst of all, he did it without armies. Without allies, without hesitation, and as Nightfall drifted back into deep space, its engines humming like a low and endless storm, Kale stood alone on the darkened bridge, staring at the swirling stars outside with eyes that looked less like human eyes and more like windows into a grief too deep for the universe to contain. His reflection in the glass was sharp, hollow, haunted, and for a moment he could see her there, Celine, smiling like she used to, young, hopeful, full of light, and Arya behind her, steady, strong, the pillar everyone leaned on, and Lena laughing boldly, fearless even when death stared back, and the memory hit him so hard he had to look away, breath trembling as he whispered, "You should have lived. You were meant to lead, not die alone." The ship said nothing, it only listened, its systems flickering softly like a heartbeat syncing with his pain, and Kale pressed his palm against the cold surface of a console, as if trying to feel a warmth that no longer existed, and in the silence that wrapped around him like a shroud, he finally allowed himself the truth he had buried beneath rage. He wasn't just hunting revenge. He was trying to make the universe understand what it had taken from him. Meanwhile, across the Empire, citizens who once cheered executions now lowered their heads in shame, watching broadcasts replaying the three generals' final moments, and suddenly those faces no longer looked like criminals. They looked like martyrs, brave and unbroken in their last breath, and whispers grew in crowded streets, in market squares, in dim-lit taverns. They were heroes, the Empire lied, they killed innocents. And fear began to turn into doubt, doubt into guilt, guilt into anger, not at Kale, but at the Empire that had created him. On the capital world, high-ranking officials argued fiercely in secret chambers, voices rising in panic. His destroying us without killing civilians, his crippling our power, his turning the galaxy against us. And someone finally screamed the truth no one wanted to say. We didn't kill soldiers, we killed his family. The words struck like lightning, leaving the room stunned, breathless, because suddenly the war wasn't political, strategic, or ideological. It was personal, and personal wars never ended until one side was gone. Nightfall sensors detected a new target, an Empire communications hub responsible for spreading propaganda. The same network that broadcasted the execution across the galaxy. And Kale's eyes darkened, voice sharp but trembling with emotion as he said, they made their deaths entertainment. The course shifted. The hunt continued. When nightfall arrived, the hub was surrounded by defense satellites, fleets, and drone swarms, commanding officers shouting orders with desperation dripping from every word. He must not reach the center. Protect the network, but Nightfall didn't fire weapons. It simply pulsed, a wave of electromagnetic force rippling outward like a silent scream. And in an instant every screen, every broadcast, every system across the Empire went dark, plunging entire worlds into silence. Across the galaxy billions stared at blank monitors, confused, scared, waiting for Empire-approved lies to tell them what to think. But instead, one image appeared, flickering, grainy, then sharpening into brutal clarity. Arya, Lena, Selene, standing in chains, unbroken. Their execution replayed, but this time the Empire's triumphant commentary was gone, replaced by Kale's voice, low and steady, echoing through every world, every home, every heart. They died with honor. You watched. The silence that followed was suffocating, heavier than war, and then Kale continued, voice trembling with grief so raw it sounded like a wound bleeding open. You believed their lies. You let them murder my family. Billions felt their throats tighten, their chests ache, their eyes burn, because even those who hated humans could feel the truth. These three women had faced death with more courage than anyone in the Empire ever had. The transmission shifted again, showing Kale's face, calm, pale, eyes burning with something too fierce to name. And when he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost gentle, but every word hit like a blade. I am not here to conquer your worlds. I am here to take back what they stole. Panic exploded in the palace, officials shouting, scrambling, trying to cut the feed. But nothing worked, because Nightfall had seized control of the Empire's voice, and Kale now spoke directly to the galaxy. If you stand with the Empire, you stand with murderers. His breath shook, grief cracking through his tone. If you stand aside, I will not touch you. His eyes hardened, turning into something colder than death. But if you stand in my way, the screen flickered, showing the ruins of the forward command, the dead moon, the silenced factories. I will erase you. Then everything went black. Every world, every ship, every screen. In that crushing darkness, the galaxy realized something terrifying. Kale didn't want a throne. He didn't want glory. He wanted the Empire to feel what he felt. And nothing in existence was more dangerous than a human chasing understanding through pain. As Nightfall turned away from the communications hub, leaving it powerless and mute, Kale whispered into the empty bridge, a single promise dripping with sorrow and steel. This is for you. Arya, Lena, Selene. And somewhere deep in that whisper, in the shattered pieces of his heart, the galaxy could hear the truth. He wasn't finished. Not even close. The Empire had taken 3 lives. Kale was about to take their future. Nightfall drifted through the void like a wounded ghost, silent and relentless, its black hull reflecting nothing. Swallowing everything, moving with the cold patience of a predator that didn't need to roar to be feared. And aboard that ship, Kale stood alone in the dim glow of the observation deck, staring out at a universe that suddenly felt too large, too empty, too cruel, and for the first time since his awakening, the rage inside him flickered, replaced by something far more dangerous, something quieter, heavier, something that felt like grief slowly hardening into destiny. His reflection in the glass was a stranger. Haunted eyes, hollow cheeks, a face carved by loss, and as he pressed his hand against the transparent surface, it trembled, just slightly, as memories rose like ghosts from a grave he had never buried. He saw Arya training at dawn, sweat on her brow, laughing proudly as she beat him in a sparring match. He saw Lena sitting beside him after their first battle, fierce eyes softening as she whispered, "You made us fighters, but you also made us family." And Selene, sweet, brilliant Selene, curling up beside him on the command deck when she was young, her tiny fingers gripping his sleeve as she whispered, "You'll never leave us, right?" His chest tightened, breath catching as grief stabbed through him, sharp and merciless, and he whispered into the quiet, voice breaking like thin glass, "I left you once." Silence answered. Cold. Endless. Suffocating. The pain inside him wasn't fire anymore, it was ice, freezing him from the inside out, shaping him into something the universe should have never allowed to exist, and nightfall, as if sensing the shift, dimmed its lights, its engines slowing, almost like a heartbeat sinking with his despair. In the Empire's capital, panic had turned into full-blown chaos. Riots erupted in the streets, citizens screaming at soldiers, demanding truth, demanding justice, demanding answers the Empire no longer had. Rumors spread like wildfire. Kale was unstoppable, Kale was unkillable, Kale was coming, and fear, once the Empire's weapon, now turned against them. In the palace war room, the Emperor slammed his fist against the table, voice cracking with rage and terror. "He is breaking us without firing on civilians. He is turning the galaxy against us." Advisors trembled, generals stuttered, one finally choking out, We need something stronger. Something to match him." The room fell into a suffocating stillness. There was only one thing stronger. One project more dangerous than Baba Yaga. And they all knew the name. Project Gorgon. A secret weapon built in shadows. A living weapon created to surpass Kale himself. Unfinished, unpredictable, lethal. The Emperor's voice dropped into a whisper soaked in fear. "Activate it." His generals recoiled. "But if we release Gorgon, we could lose control. We've already lost control," the Emperor screamed, tears burning in his eyes, voice cracking. "If Baba Yaga is unleashed, we must unleash something worse." Across the palace, a sealed lab opened with a groan, icy mist spilling into the hall, and inside a massive containment tank, something stirred. A figure, human-shaped but built from engineered rage, enhanced bone, amplified muscle, a mind programmed only for one purpose, destruction. Gorgon's eyes opened, glowing white, empty of empathy, empty of love, empty of anything that made Kale human, and the scientists stepped back, horror twisting their faces as they realized what they had awakened. Gorgon was not a weapon. He was a catastrophe. Back aboard Nightfall, Kale straightened as a new signal appeared. An activation signature buried deep in Empire records. One Kale recognized instantly, one that made his stomach twist into knots. "No," he whispered, breath shaking, "they wouldn't." But they had. The Empire had chosen extinction over humility. Rage flared inside him, not anger at the weapon, but anger at the truth, that the Empire would rather destroy the galaxy than admit it was wrong. Mara entered the deck, her eyes red, her voice trembling. "Kale, talk to me. You're scaring all of us." He turned toward her slowly, his face unreadable, his voice calm in a way that felt like the silence before the universe breaks. "They created Gorgon." Mara's breath caught, her face draining of color, because she knew the rumors. Gorgon was the only soldier Kale had ever feared trained beside, the only being whose power could match his, the only weapon built not to protect, but to kill him. "Kale, what are you going to do?" she whispered, voice cracking like a brittle bone. Kale closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, the pain was gone. The grief was gone. All that remained was resolve. Hollow. Absolute. Unbreakable. "I'm going to end this." Mara stepped forward, tears slipping down her cheeks, her voice shaking. "Kale, you can't keep destroying yourself just to punish them." He looked at her, and for a brief second something human flickered in his eyes. soft, wounded, unbearably sad. "I'm not punishing them," he whispered. "I'm stopping them." Nightfall's engines surged, power roaring through the ship like thunder trapped in a cage, and the stars ahead warped as the ship prepared for its most dangerous jump yet, the jump into the Empire's capital system. But before the jump completed, Nightfall's screens lit up with a transmission. Grainy, unstable, but unmistakable. Arya's voice. "Kale!" His heart stopped. His breath vanished. Her face flickered into view, recorded long before her death, eyes fierce and full of life. "If you're seeing this, it means we're gone." Kale's knees weakened, hands trembling as her voice poured into him like a blade sheathed in love. "Don't lose yourself. Don't become what they are. Live, even if we can't." The recording ended. Silence crushed him. And in that silence, Kale whispered the words that broke the last fragile piece of him. "I don't know how." Nightfall jumped. And the hunt turned into a war none of them were ready for. Not even Kale. Because grief had driven him this far. But what came next would demand something far more dangerous than fury. It would demand what was left of his humanity. And that was the one thing he was losing fastest. Nightfall burst out of hyperspace above the Empire's capital like a silent omen. A black shape against a burning sky, and the moment it appeared, alarms wailed across the planet. Lights flickered in every tower, every bunker, every command post, and the entire world seemed to inhale in terror, because the myth they mocked had arrived in flesh and steel. Kale stood on the bridge, shoulders rigid, breath steady but shallow, eyes fixed on the colossal city world below, a world dripping with power, arrogance, and the memories of 3 graves he would never visit. His hands hovered over the controls, fingers trembling not from fear, but from the unbearable truth that this was the end of the path he had been walking since the moment those shots rang out. This was where grief became fate. But before Nightfall could descend, before Kale could unleash the storm inside him, every screen on the bridge flickered, glitching with static like a dying heartbeat, and then a voice, low, hollow, inhuman, filled the room. "Kale." Mara spun toward the monitors, her face draining of color, her breath catching in her throat, because the voice wasn't a transmission. It was a presence. The static cleared, revealing a figure standing in a dark chamber somewhere deep within the Empire's core. A figure tall, broad, carved like a weapon, eyes glowing white, skin pale and scarred, muscles bound by armored restraints. Gorgon. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't feel. He simply stared, and the sound of his voice rumbled like metal grinding through bone. "You are the target." Kale's jaw tightened, his heart slamming against his ribs because the last time he looked into those eyes, they belonged to a brother-in-arms during training, a fellow soldier he once believed could become something good, until the Empire twisted him into a machine. Mara whispered, voice trembling, "Kale, we have to leave." But Kale didn't move, didn't look away, didn't blink. "No," he said, barely audible but sharp enough to cut steel. "It ends here." The transmission expanded, revealing the capital skies filling with ships, hundreds, thousands, forming a ring around Nightfall, weapons armed, engines roaring, a trap closing like a steel jaw. Gorgon stepped forward, metal restraints snapping loose, hitting the floor with the weight of a falling star. "The Empire made me to end you." His voice was dead, emotionless, a hollow echo of everything Kale once feared he could become if he ever stopped feeling pain. Kale swallowed, his voice quiet but shaking as he murmured, "I never wanted this." Gorgon tilted his head slightly, robotic and cold. "Wanting is a human flaw. You are no longer human." Those words pierced Kale deeper than any weapon, because for the first time, he didn't know if they were wrong. The screen went black. And then the skies opened. The Empire unleashed everything, missiles, beams, drones, cannon fire, turning the space around Nightfall into a storm of burning light, a hurricane of destruction so violent it shook the ship down to its bones. Mara grabbed the railing, screaming over the chaos, "We can't take this. We need shields." But Kale stood unmoving, eyes locked on the flames outside, and whispered, "Let them fire." Nightfall absorbed the first wave, metal groaning, hull cracking, alarms blaring, sparks bursting across the bridge. But Kale didn't flinch, didn't panic, didn't look away. His voice was soft, breathless with grief. "They think pain will stop me." He lifted his head, eyes burning. "Pain made me." He slammed his palm onto the command surface, and Nightfall roared awake. Engines igniting like a star exploding, systems surging with ancient power, and in a single deafening moment the ship unleashed a shockwave, not outward, but inward, bending gravity, twisting the battlefield, sending enemy ships spiraling into each other as if the heavens had turned against them. Across the capital, people watched in horror and awe as the Empire's mighty fleets, meant to protect, meant to dominate, collapsed like collapsing paper sculptures, falling into ruin without Kale firing a single shot. But the devastation didn't stop Gorgon. He emerged from the capital fortress, descending into the sky like a falling nightmare, each step cracking the ground beneath him, each movement vibrating through the air, his body glowing with unnatural strength. He didn't need ships. He didn't need armies. He was the weapon. Nightfall landed on a scorched platform outside the capital gates, and Kale walked down the ramp alone, each step heavy, steady, final, his boots echoing against the metal as if marking the heartbeat of the entire world. Gorgon stood waiting, a monster built in the shape of a man. The sky burned behind him. The city trembled beneath him. "They died because of you," Gorgon said, voice void of mercy. The words struck Kale like a blade, slicing into wounds that never healed. His breath hitched. His fingers curled. For a moment, just a moment, he looked shattered. Then he lifted his head, eyes blazing with pain so fierce it turned into strength. "They died," he whispered, voice cracking, "because the Empire was afraid of what they could become." Gorgon's fists clenched, metal groaning under his grip. "The Empire gave me purpose. I will end you." Kale stepped forward, tears glistening in his eyes. Not weakness, but truth. "You can end me," he said softly, "but you can't end what they meant." Gorgon lunged. The ground shook. The sky split. And in that collision, Kale's grief collided with the Empire's greatest sin. Sparks of light shot across the battlefield like dying stars. It was not rage that fueled Kale as he met the attack. It was heartbreak. Pure. Endless. Unforgiving. Every strike he threw was a memory. Every step he took was a promise. Every breath was a name. Arya. Lena. Celine. Far above, billions watched. Not cheering. Not screaming. Just trembling. Because they finally understood. This wasn't a battle between weapons. It was a battle between what humanity lost and what the Empire created to replace it. And only one of those forces still had a heart. Kale staggered, blood staining his lips, muscles trembling, bones screaming, but he didn't fall. Couldn't fall. Because he wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting not to fail them again. Gorgon drove him back with another brutal blow, sending him crashing to one knee, vision blurring, breath ragged. But Kale lifted his head, tears falling into dust, and whispered hoarsely, "I will not let your darkness rewrite their light." The battlefield went silent. The Empire held its breath. And somewhere deep inside the universe, something shifted, like destiny leaning forward. Kale stood, broken, bleeding, unbowed. Gorgon stared at him with cold confusion, because the Empire had given him strength, but not soul. "Why do you still stand?" Kale's voice cracked, raw and trembling, but louder than the war around him. "Because love is stronger than anything you were built for." And for the first time, Gorgon hesitated. The war was no longer about destruction. It was about the last fragile thread of humanity holding Kale together, and whether it would break, or become the spark that could burn an empire to ash. The universe waited for the answer. The ending had begun. The hesitation in Gorgon's eyes lasted less than a heartbeat, but it was enough to change the shape of destiny, enough to make the burning sky above them feel like it froze in place, enough to make every watching soul across the galaxy lean forward as if the universe itself was holding its breath. And in that tiny sliver of silence Kale stood trembling on shattered ground, blood dripping from his mouth, vision blurred, body barely able to remain upright. But his eyes, those hollow, grief-filled eyes, shone with something Gorgon had never been programmed to understand. Love turned into unbreakable will. The wind whipped dust around them. Flames burned in the ruins nearby. Ships crackled as they fell from the sky like dying metal birds. But Kale didn't hear any of it. He heard only 3 voices in the back of his mind, young and bright, calling his name the way they used to, laughing, training, promising they would change the galaxy together. And the pain of knowing they never got that chance punched through him so sharply that he staggered. But instead of falling, he straightened, shoulders shaking, breath ragged, whispering their names like a prayer. Arya, Lena, Celine. Gorgon's hesitation broke. His expression hardened into icy emptiness, and he charged forward with impossible speed, a blur of engineered muscle and weaponized rage, each step cracking the ground like thunder trapped in flesh. And when his fist collided with Kale's chest, the impact sent shockwaves through the battlefield, flinging Kale backward, slamming him into the broken wall of a fallen tower, his body folding, his bones screaming, his breath torn from his lungs in a soundless gasp. Mara screamed from inside Nightfall, pounding on the glass, tears streaking her face. "Kale! Get up! Get up!" But Kale didn't move. His limbs lay heavy, numb, cold, and for a terrifying moment it looked like the legend was finished, like the Baba Yaga had finally fallen, like one man's grief could only carry him so far before his body surrendered. Gorgon stepped toward him, steps slow, deliberate, victorious, and his voice, flat, hollow, echoed through the ruins, "You are over." Snow began to fall, not real snow, but ash, drifting softly from burning ships, settling on Kale's shoulders like a shroud, and he felt himself sinking, slipping into darkness, his heartbeat slowing, his vision narrowing, and in that fading tunnel of awareness he saw them. Arya's steady eyes, Lena's fierce grin, Celine's gentle smile, standing together, reaching for him as if to pull him home, and his chest cracked open with a pain far worse than any wound. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice barely a breath, barely a sound. "I failed you." His eyes fluttered shut. The galaxy went silent. And then, something shifted. A breeze. A pulse. A memory. Celine's voice, soft and small, the way she spoke when she was a child, echoed inside him, "You don't leave us. Ever." His eyes snapped open. The world rushed back into focus. And Kale, broken and bleeding and barely alive, forced his trembling hands against the ground and pushed. His arms shook violently. His ribs screamed. His breath trembled. But he rose, inch by inch, breath by breath, until he was standing again, swaying but unbowed. Gorgon froze. Mara choked on a sob. Across the galaxy, billions watched, spellbound. Kale lifted his head, tears streaking through dirt and blood, voice hoarse but steady. "I promised them. I'd always come back." Gorgon roared, charging again, faster, harder, unstoppable. But Kale didn't fight back with rage this time. He moved with purpose, with memory, with love guiding every strike, every step, every breath. And when Gorgon swung, Kale didn't block with brute strength. He redirected, turned, twisted, using Gorgon's own force against him. The way he used to teach Arya during drills, whispering, "Strength is nothing without soul." Blow after blow shook the air, sparks exploded, metal groaned, the ground split beneath their feet. But Kale kept moving, fueled not by vengeance anymore, but by the last fragments of his humanity refusing to die. Gorgon struck him across the face, sending blood spraying into the air, and Kale staggered, but did not fall. Gorgon drove a knee into his gut, and Kale doubled over, but rose again. Gorgon slammed both fists into his back, and Kale collapsed to one knee, but lifted himself up with shaking arms, whispering through clenched teeth, "Not this time." The hesitation returned. Gorgon stared, confusion flickering in those dead white eyes, because no calculation, no algorithm, no programming could explain a man who should be dead still standing. "Why do you fight?" he demanded, voice cracking with static. Kale looked up, eyes shining with tears, not of pain, but of love, memory, belonging. "Because they believed in a world better than this," he whispered. "And I won't let their belief die with them." For the first time in his existence, Gorgon stepped back. And Nightfall, sensing Kale's resolve, activated a pulse, not a weapon of destruction, but a weapon of truth. A projection of Arya, Lena, and Selene, their final recorded message, their faces alive, their voices strong, echoing across the battlefield. Kale, if we fall, promise us one thing. Gorgon froze. Kale's breath shuddered. Don't become what they fear. Kale's knees gave out, but he caught himself, gripping the scorched metal beneath him, his heart breaking open as their final words washed over him. Live. For us. The projection faded. The silence was deafening. Kale bowed his head, sobbing once. Quiet, broken, real. And then lifted his gaze, voice trembling but filled with a strength deeper than war. This ends without extinction. Gorgon blinked, confusion rippling through his cold exterior. Kale reached out, not with a weapon, not with violence, but with a hand, open, shaking, human. You were made to destroy, he whispered. But you don't have to die that way. For the first time, Gorgon's expression shifted. Not rage, not hatred, just uncertainty, a fracture in the armor of programming, a flicker of something almost like doubt. And doubt, in the heart of a weapon, was the beginning of freedom. But before he could answer, before the battlefield could settle, before the galaxy could breathe again, a tremor shook the ground beneath them, a colossal surge of power rising from the capital's core, alarms blaring across the city. The Emperor, desperate and broken, had triggered the final failsafe, an extinction bomb designed to obliterate the entire planet rather than let Kale win. Mara screamed from the ship, "Kale! The planet's going to blow!" Gorgon's eyes widened, not with fear, but with the first spark of understanding. Kale stared at him, tears falling. "It was never us," he whispered. "It was always them." The countdown thundered through the ruins. Gorgon looked at his hand. And in that final heartbeat, he moved. Nightfall exploded into motion. A blinding flash swallowed the capital. And the galaxy was left staring into a silence so deep it felt like the end of everything. No bodies. No signal. No Kale. No Gorgon. Just absence. And then, across the stars, a single transmission crackled to life. Kale's voice, faint, distant, but alive. "Humanity is not finished." The screen cut out. The galaxy shivered. The legend of Baba Yaga did not die. It vanished. And somewhere, in the uncharted dark, a new story began. One no empire could control. Humanity had not won through destruction. Humanity had survived through love. And the universe would never forget it.